welcome back to the 18th edition of the Women's Forum for the Economy. And once again, we are going to have a very important session. So I want you to work with me now. Text your friends, tell them, women stick together. That's simple. It's a blackmail, I know. Let's blackmail them all the way. Women stick together. Text your friends wherever they are. Tell them to come back. So to introduce this session, I want to put one of the most important quotes. So when I was writing my PhD, so I did my PhD studies in peace and conflict resolution, dealing with issues of diplomacy and international relations in Africa. So one of the important quotes that I loved and I lived by as I was doing my research and also teaching peace and conflict resolution in Africa and the United States was a quote by one of the professors who argued that the history of mankind, the rise and fall of civilization, is unquestionable the story of conflict. Conflict and violence has far-reaching consequences to all members of the human race. And now to help us unpack this topic, I'm going to invite Ruchira Gupta and Zainab Salbi, who will be engaging together with our panelists on our theme, Women at War, unveiling the far-reaching consequences of conflict and violence. Let's give them a round of applause as they join us on stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here today to moderate a panel, Women at War, unveiling the far-reaching consequences of conflict and violence. I would like to make one suggestion for a change in the name of the panel. Instead of Women at War, Women in War, Women affected by war, because that's what our panel is going to discuss today. My name is Ruchira Gupta. I'm the founder of an anti-sex trafficking organization called Apne Aap, which works to send children from red light areas into school. I'm also the author of a new book called I Kick and I Fly, and in France, Girls Bazaar. I'm a journalist, and I won an Emmy for making a documentary on sex trafficking from India and Nepal. Today, I am joined by Zainab Salbi, who you can see on the screen behind me. Zainab is a leading voice in the women's rights movement. She herself has experienced the ravages of war, written a book about it, and spoken in all kinds of platforms and forums against war and what women experience, from CNN to The Guardian. And right now, she's also the co-founder of Daughters of Earth. In the past, she had founded Women for Women International. Without much ado, I'm going to ask Zainab the first question of today's panel. Zainab, you have experienced war. You have decided to break the silence in your very courageous and hard-hitting book, and you have continued to be a voice for peace and against war. What was the experience like, and what is it that we can all do in this huge auditorium of activists and sympathizers who can take your message forward to build empathy for the women who are affected by war?
Well, it's a pleasure to see you, Ruchira, and I'm so sorry for not being with all of you in France, but thank you for having me here. As Ruchira mentioned, I am born and raised in Iraq, and I lived through the first 10 years of war and counted the many wars in my country, and then later worked at founded Women for Women International and worked with almost all the wars since Bosnia and Herzegovina until the wars of the day. And here's what I learned from wars, which is really talked about. Wars, we do understand it as in we see it in the news as fighting and tanks and military and politicians talking. We actually rarely understand or see or discuss war from women's perspective, because what women see in war is very different than what men see in war. While men are running the front line discussions, indeed, women are actually keeping the backline discussion going. That means they're keeping food on the table, they're keeping the schools running, they're keeping the factories working, streets working. And I learned that as a child in war. You know, I was watching the news in war. I was like, it's always from men perspective. And as a child, everyone in my life was a woman running the show in my life. So there's two arguments in here that is very important to share. One is we need to understand wars and peace from a woman's perspective, not only from a man's perspective, because women define wars and peace in a different way. They don't define peace, for example, as just simply the ending of fighting. They define it as how do we build life? And their measurements for peace is very different than the measurements of men, which is usually just ending the war. I do not argue that women's views are superior than men. It's just different. And that difference is important for us to truly understand how do we build peace and how do we change our history, as our moderator said, from a history of war to a history of peace. I do believe we are living in a pivotal moment in our history right now, not only because of the horrible wars that are undergoing right now. Shockingly so. I've been in this world of working in war zones for more than 30 years now, and I'm shocked that we continue to have it and not learn from it. But I do believe that unless we make this century the feminine century, what is at stake is not only our humanity, is also our Earth's existence, or our own humanity's existence. And that is a pivotal moment for all of us in women, particularly. The feminine includes men, as you all know, but it is all incumbent on us to not only talk about our victimhood, but talk about our feminine values and rise in defining how do we want to see the definition of war and peace? How do we want to see the future of our humanity in a way that is not only articulated by masculine values that made it a war history, but hopefully into an evolution of feminine value that can make it into a peace history? I think we can. We need to learn how to do that. We need to have the courage to speak about that, and we can.
So profound, Zainab. And, from what you have said, I have a follow-up question for you. You said that, it's not just war which ends and then it's all over. Women are the ones who are picking up the pieces and pulling homes together, pulling countries together. What you have said is that peace is not just the absence of war, but it's a rebuilding of life. What is the biggest challenge you face in rebuilding that life and really creating a peace that lasts and lasts?
Oh, I mean, the challenges are many. One is the heartbreak. I would lie to you if I get emotional talking about it, because I would lie to you if I dismiss the heartbreak, the heartbreak that we are seeing right now in the wars in the Middle East, the heartbreak that we see in Ukraine and Russia. It's a heartbreak to see. I mean, I am someone who war destroyed my home and every memory in my life, from my school, my neighborhood, everything. So you have to deal with the heartbreak. Now, how do you deal with that? Heartbreaks entail tools, entails working on yourself, psychological support, all of that. But beside that, what women need is two more things. Is one, financing. It is fascinating for me that 10 cents out of every humanitarian dollar that goes in war zones or in post-war reconstruction goes to women. 10 cents. Even though we actually have track records of and data and figures that women are keeping life going. They focus on the maintenance of life, school, jobs, farming, all of these things. Even though we have track record that if you include women in peace negotiations, these peace agreements have 30% chance to last longer. by 5 years. So I mean, it's just like we have track. So we need financing of women, move the 10 cents out of every dollar that goes to humanitarian aid to 50 cents, and we need the inclusion of women in the decision making table. That is a very important point, and we say it easily with us women, but honestly, I continue to be shocked and surprised how many men at a leadership level, from the UN to different countries to different states, asking me, but really, why do we need to have women? And we don't understand what they say. We need to train our minds, all of our minds, men included, but also all of us, we come from different cultures, that we need to hear from not only our mind's ears, but from our heart ears. Meaning, people can express themselves in different ways. We just need to have the practice of listening, or as my friend at Vuslat Foundation call it, generous listening.
Yeah.
Which is, how do we listen to the wisdom from a 360% perspective? And then last but not least, we need to invest in women's education. And that is not learnings, the A, B, and C. Education, meaning every woman needs to understand her power in society, in culture, in economy, from within the narrative of her culture. I dismiss the idea that there are cultures who are oppressed to women and there are cultures who are liberated to women. I really do not. I am someone who lived in many cultures. All cultures have value for women, and all cultures have oppression of women. Which one we highlight and which one we focus on is our job. And so we need, the emancipation of women has to come from within our narrative, their narratives and their culture, and that is through education.
Wonderful. You can hear the applause. What I want from you, Zainab, now, because I have seen you tirelessly keep working to create a better world. And you have worked as an anti-war activist to a women's rights leader, and now you run this NGO called Daughters of Earth, where you're connecting the work that we do on education and anti-war with the planet itself. What are the connections that you see? It's almost like a rhizome, I feel. Your life is like that. Would you like to share with this audience how you connect all these three things?
You know, for me, climate change is the biggest, most existential crisis that humanity is being faced. And what it entails, the solution for that particular this particular crisis is actually collaboration, is a different relationship with Earth, is frankly different relationship with each other and with ourselves. Different relationship with consumerism, different relationship with how we buy, how we communicate with it. At the essence of it, it entails different relationship. Now, again, in climate change, in the biggest crisis, in my opinion, I see the same arc of the story. Women in war, for example, are affected the most. These are data. 80% of refugees around the world because of wars are women and children. And what they are doing the most to keep life, they get 10 cents out of every dollar, and they are excluded from the negotiating tables on how to build peace. We're seeing that today as we speak about the war in Gaza, for example. Excludes women in the discussion of that. Now, in climate change, it's exactly the same arc of the story. Women are impacted the most by climate change, according to the UN, with all kinds of crises, from displacements. 80% of the displaced people because of climate crisis are women, and food insecurities. They are doing the most to protect and preserve the earth, literally protecting lands and rivers and water. They are the fastest accelerator in shifting to new renewable energy and regenerative agriculture. And they get 2 cents out of every dollar that goes to climate solutions. And they are nowhere in the decision-making table. For me, we cannot talk about climate or wars or without the two facts. We need more financing for women. We really need more money. I am tired of good speeches. We need more deliverables, and we need to change the 2 cents to 50 cents, the 10 cents to 50 cents. And we need the full inclusion, not symbolic inclusion, of women in the negotiating tables. And that means women who are not in suits. That means indigenous women. That means women from different cultures. We need to value these wisdoms because they are important. And so for me, we have to be very strategic. We know that we have something unique and magical about us. Let's focus on getting more finance for women, and let's focus on getting more women included at the negotiating tables. And these, for me, if we do these things, then we can change the trajectory of actually how do we turn this century into the feminine century. Personally, as women, we also need to have the discipline and the courage and the support to lead with feminine values, meaning that we do not replicate masculine values that got us to this crisis right now. It got us to a lot of development, but it got us to this crisis right now. Each of us have some values within our hearts that we lead from our heartbeats. And we need to dare to speak them, and we need to dare to lead by them. It would be remiss upon us, for those who are in leadership position, to get in leadership and then replicate what men have done. We need to inspire men to join us in these new values and to hear and speak with our hearts, ears, and mouth and wisdom. And this is the ultimate thing that I came to learn in all my work in war zones. And I do get emotional about it, because what we don't know is these women are incredibly courageous. And they have taught me more than anybody else about the power of beauty and joy and celebration and the power of resilience. Now, the best way we honor all women in wars and all women survivors of wars is not to speak about their victimhood, but to speak about their courage and ensure their inclusion and their financing and their support. That's something we can do.
Thank you. Thank you, Zainab. And on that inspiring note, I am going to lead us into the panel today. I'm inspired, I'm shown a path to listen and move forward. And now we are going to have the next speaker on the panel. Her name is Amani Ballour. She actually ran a hospital while bombs were raining down on her. And I am going to ask her, how did she do that? The very values that Zainab spoke about, the resilience, the courage, the desire that life must continue, how did it happen? Amina is also going to join us on the screen, so we will wait for a connection. I think she's going to be there very, very soon. Amina is a pediatrician, and she has been an advocate for women and child rights for years as well, just like Zainab, and is still living in the middle of a war or a post-war situation. There she is, as you can see, possibly in her hospital. I'm not quite sure, but Amina, welcome. My first question to you is that how did you find the resilience to carry on while bombs were falling all around you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Amani Ballour, and I'm in the US now, so I'm not working in the hospital anymore. Living in a war zone for like more than 6 years, an underground hospital under bombing, and I was in a besieged area without like food or enough medical supplies, medicine. We were running out of everything. It was, horrible, if I want to describe the kind of life we live. So it was very hard to think about, about the patriarchal control for other men on women, which is in my community, like men control everything. So it was hard to think about this in the time of war. So I wanted to do this because I believe that at any time women need to get their rights, to get justice, to get freedom. If not so, we will, stay under control for forever. So I just believed in myself. I was a doctor between like 13 doctors in the hospital. I believed that I can do this, and this is, the key, that when you believe that you can. I said, I want to run this hospital. I know this hospital from the beginning when we started to build it. It was like 2 rooms at the beginning. And then after a few years, it becomes like the biggest hospital in the area. It's all underground. So I know every single thing in the hospital, and I believe that I can lead it. I can manage everything. We make like small election in the hospital, and my colleagues select me. And I believe that I could make change to this hospital. I could run it positively. I could make it the biggest hospital in the area. So just because I believe that I can, I could. And many men after this, like I am from very conservative area, and men believe that always that women have to stay at home. I mean, I'm from Syria and from the countryside, not also from the cities. So many men came to me finally and said, you really were good and you did a great job. So this is very important, and this inspired me to do more also.
Amani, I, Amani, I know that you had to overcome a lot of traditional and sort of customary obstacles to even get an education before you could run this hospital in the middle of a war. And there were many gender stereotypes that girls should not be educated, and you fought for that education. Can you talk about that, and what is the importance of education that you find in your life right now?
Well, I have 3 sisters. They all older than me, and they got married in very young age. Like my oldest sister got married when she was 13 years old, and I just was a kid, and I just always said that I don't want to be like her. Getting married in my community for a woman or for a girl means just to stay at home, do the housework, be a wife, maybe a mother or not, we don't know. But this is all about getting married. Very few women who work in my community that time. So I just said by nature, I mean, that I don't want to be like her. I don't want to get married very early. And you know, when I was like 13 or 14, many, like we say, offers, marriage offer get to me because this is very normal in my community. I always heard from my mother that education is very important for the girl, and this is stuck in my mind. And when I think that I don't want to get married like my sisters, I want to be different. I can do more in this life, just this. And I said, what can make me different? It's education. It's education. My mother always said it's the most important thing in the life. So of course education is, because you know it can, of course it can affect all the aspects of life. It can change everything. It can raise the health awareness, create a new generation that can change their communities. Also, it can give to the young girls or to women, give us acknowledgement, give us skills, and give us opportunities. Opportunities to get, for me, is the most important thing, to get good jobs for women, to be financially independent. This is very, very important to me. When you are financially independent, you can have opinion. You can talk actually. And I'm talking this from the countryside, small city in Syria. That's why I say I can talk, because many women can't talk. So yeah, we can talk. We can start to do small businesses, maybe to lead a hospital, to lead a school, to do a small business at home. Sometimes this is very good for our women in countryside. This can change our community, and it did. Now the situation is much different than before. So education, which gave us this skills, this acknowledgement, and also it can encourage us to help other women. When I was a manager of the hospital, I hired many women, like 12 women in the hospital. This is a big number. I mean, the hospital, we were like 100 people, and most of them were men, like only 12 women. I hired many of them so we could help each other to achieve justice for women.
Wonderful, so inspiring. You said that you're a girl just from a small village in Syria, and yet you have built all these international friendships, connections, and collaborations, and built this network of so many stakeholders that you work with to get resources and support for the work you do. Can you talk a little bit about how do you do that?
Yes. When I led the hospital, we decided to document this and show this to other world. The horror of the war, the great work for the doctors and health workers in a underground hospital amid a war zone, a wartime. So we document this, and we have this documentary. We show this for all the people around the world, and it was its name is The Cave, and it was nominated for the Oscars, so it got internationally attention. And I was very happy with this because this will make all the people see the horrors of the war. So it will not be, we will not have more wars again. And it's very disappointing and heartbreaking to see the war again now, and the horrors that the doctors and health workers face in hospitals in Gaza. And Gaza, again, everything is repeated again, the same things that we face. So it's very, disappointing for us. I wanted the world to see this, just to see also the courage and the bravery for women, for the health workers, also, especially women, females, how they work at the same time with the women, do the same job, do the same things with the women, and they don't being treated at the equal way. That's why. This is what I wanted to show to the people. And I just want to say that the international community is very, I want to use a good word, so can I say, so I can say it, like, it's very, I want to say disappointing. It is very, shocking to see their act with the wars around the world. They couldn't stop it, and they couldn't stop, the horrors, the massacres, everything bad we see. So this is stuck with me. As Zainab said, from all the, things and the challenges I faced in the war zone in Al-Ghouta, I still have this heartbreaking, and seeing this repeated again will stuck it forever. But I would just have want to just give some hope to the young generation, to the young girls who watch that. We can make this sadness maybe inside us, this bad feelings. We can use it as a power to change, and we are able to do this. We can change our communities, we can change the world, and many women did in the past, and we can do this also, and we will, inshallah, in the future.
Thank you so much. We will definitely change things, and we will remember the words and your courage in running the underground hospital and the power of education that you insisted on, and which helped so many others as you went along. Thank you so much, Amani. My next panelist today is Olya Kudinenko. She's from Ukraine, and she runs an NGO called Kids for Ukraine, which began working before the war. She was helping kids who had cancer, and she had to keep the work going even after the war started. She has faced incredible challenges in doing that, and also found some incredible partnerships and alliances to do so. So my first question to Olya is that how were you able to keep the work for the children going in spite of the war?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm so grateful to be on this panel with you. And this is an honor. I started my work in 2011. So I've been helping kids for 12 years. But a few years ago, when I became a mom myself, I understood that I'm not helping only children. Since 2011, I've been helped more than 60,000 children with access to the treatment and improving improving quality of the treatment, but also I helped 60,000 moms. When the war started in Ukraine, we were responsible for evacuating children outside of Ukraine. We evacuated more than 1,500 families to 16 countries, and we continue to support 600 families per month right now. And what can I say in terms of the panel and like our discussion today? We are talking about the future, we are talking about nowadays, about education, about developing communities, developing world, helping women. But how can we say and separate children from women? If our children are not protected and not receiving the help and like not having everything, women are doing that, they are connected. And as a previous panelist said, women are primary caregivers. And it means not only providing help for children and like take care of them, but also about disabled relatives, about elderly people in our families. And it's all our work and unpaid work. How can we find time for education and for job if our closest one, our future in terms of children, are not protected? So talking about my NGO and continuing like work what I do, it means I cannot separate children, their illness, from family. I cannot help women to be developed.
But, you had to deal with mothers who had to be the voice of children at a time when all systems had broken down. And that must have been a huge mental burden on the mothers. So how did they keep going, and what kind of support did you give on mental health? Was it education? Was it counseling?
What I hear the most, that it's not time for mental health right now. But it's never time for mental health, never. So we are supporting mothers because children are depends on them. We are providing psychotherapy support, we are providing psychosocial support for them, and we are trying to provide free time for them. I've been helping for kids for 12 years, even before the war. I heard like hundreds of times that it's not time to have time for yourself. It's not time to take care of yourself, to nurture yourself. But if you are not taking care of yourself at the first place, if you're not putting a mask on yourself, you would be never able to support anyone around you. And as Zainab said, that women are the first people who are working on the back lines, right? So women, the first one who's gonna rebuild the country, the first one who's gonna give everything to the country, we're given. If we are not helping ourselves, if we are not supporting ourselves, we would never achieve anything.
Very true. How did you become an activist?
So I live in the paradigm that if you have something in your life, you could share it. I was very young and naive when I started my charity. Our first month, I fundraised $1,000, and because of my naivety, I thought, oh my God, I helped all children with cancer in Ukraine. $1,000, solve the problem. But I do believe that you can help with your professional skills, with your money, with your time. And I didn't know nothing, and that's good, because when you know the scale of the problem, probably you would never start acting. So I started with a little, and then I found out everything. I just couldn't stop changing. And if I could use my voice for something, and I would always help the most vulnerable. You would never see kids on the front page at any newspaper, just because they're not given any power. They're not the market. They're not in statistics. They're the reality. And that's great that women united already, and we can stand up and support each other. Children couldn't do that. So that's my choice. I just couldn't resist myself.
Thank you for what you do. I'm a cancer survivor, so it means a lot that you're doing it for children against such great odds. Thank you. My next panelist is Jaha. Jaha Dukureh is a UN Women Ambassador, and she's also the founder of Safe Hands for Girls. Many of you must be aware of her work against FGM, but she does so much more. And I'm going to ask her a question which will shed some light. You have actually been a victim of violence, and you have then gone on to help other women and girls who are victims of violence. How did you make this transition from victim to survivor?
Well, I don't know if I survived anything. I think I would like to start with that because as a global community, I think sometimes we throw terms, but I was born in a culture that felt that female genital mutilation was something that was right for me. At 1 week old, I was subjected to FGM. At the age of 15, I became a child bride. And at the age of 17, I became a child bride for the second time. But you have to realize that globally, 200 million women have been subjected to FGM, and 200 million women are living with the consequences of FGM. And we have more than 600 million girls who have been forced to get married against their will. And when you force a girl to get married, you've given someone the right to rape them over and over again. And I don't think a lot of times we look at child marriage in that lens. A lot of times when we talk about sexual violence, and women and refugees in general are very, very vulnerable. We see that in times of war, violence against women and girls is exacerbated. And things that happen to girls already happen to them. A lot of times parents feel that they have to subject their children to these practices in order for them to escape other forms of violence. So my story is not unique. I just think that I'm very, very fortunate to be in front of you today. I think there's millions of girls like me who don't make it this far, who don't get the chance to sit in front of you because some of them have lost their lives. Some of them never find the courage. So because of them, I don't think I survived anything.
That's extremely humbling. Thanks for saying that so openly. And you have used the power of your voice to create awareness. And I can see why, because you make yourself so vulnerable that people connect with you. And you organize school trainings, you organize trainings outside, you're constantly talking, engaging, training. What in your lifetime have you seen the power of education do?
So one of the things that we did when we first started this work was saying that we wanted to end some of these harmful traditional practices in our generation. And you realize that the only way you can do that is through education, because 74% of girls in my country have been through FGM. And I know that I cannot change what happened to me, but I can change what happens to my daughter. And because of that, we started school clubs. And for us, the longer we keep girls in school, the more we delay marriage. Because one of the things that we noticed through data that we were collecting was that at primary school, there's gender parity in many schools in our country. But the moment girls start getting into middle school and high school, we see that they start dropping out of school. And the reason is household chores. Sometimes there's no transportation, and because of that, their parents are worried that if they allow them to walk to the next village, they might get raped on the way or something might happen to them. So because of all of these obstacles that are against women, you see that they don't get to finish school. And we also see the consequences it has in our country's economies and our GDPs, and women being able to meaningfully contribute to the growth of our economies. So because of that, our way to ending both FGM and child marriage is ensuring that girls are enrolled in school and that they stay in school. And we also want to ensure that it's mandatory that girls that are between the ages of 9 and 10 take a class where they understand what violence against women and girls are, so that way they can be able to stand up for themselves and prevent themselves. So education is crucial to everything that we do.
Absolutely. But do you think that because during conflict, education breaks down, education systems break down, does FGM go up during conflict? Is there a connection between FGM and war and conflict?
not just war and conflict, but I think even during national disasters like COVID, right? And especially during war and conflict, we see that FGM and child marriage cases go up. The reason is, and we saw this during COVID, because girls were out of school and they were staying at home, parents saw that this was an opportunity for them to put them through FGM, so that way it gives them time to heal. And this is the same thing that happens during conflict. I remember working in Atlanta and working with a lot of immigrant and girls from refugee backgrounds. And when I asked them where did they go through FGM, a lot of them went through FGM at refugee camps in different areas of the world. So you know that when conflict happens, it doesn't stop violence against women and girls. If anything, it increases it.
Yes. I'm an activist against sex trafficking, and I've spent a lot of time in some war zones and seen sex trafficking go up, along with sexual violence and rape being used as a weapon of war. I was in Kosovo. I helped create the zero tolerance policy for the Secretary General at the UN, and just kept seeing relentless sexual assault during war, both of trafficking of women, but also rape as a weapon of war. And in my country, India, I have seen child marriage being used by parents who want to prevent their daughters from being trafficked. Doesn't really help them in the long run, but it's a strategy they use. So I totally understand what you're saying and know and have experienced it. My last panelist today is Dayal Mawad, and she is an author and journalist. Her latest book is All She Lost, which I decided to bring on stage because we could not get copies made available for you. It's just come out. Dalal is from Lebanon, and she has reported on personal experiences in her book about what does it mean when a war happens, when a country comes to the brink of collapse, and how do you still survive that? So my first question to Dalal is that in your book, All She Lost, which is the story of the Beirut blast and Lebanon's collapse as told by women, you talk about women who are survivors. You talk about lived experiences. You mention that they have never healed from trauma. Tell us more about that.
Yes, indeed. Not just Lebanese, but I think Arab women, I've covered the Middle East for more than a decade, they never heal from their traumas. You have new traumas that pile on top of previous ones before you've had time to heal from those. And briefly, before I get to the reason behind that, what I've encountered in my work in the Middle East is that, in this book, for instance, Lebanese women who survived the Beirut explosion are actually survivors of endless cycles of violence. History seems to repeat itself for these women. So they're survivors of the civil wars, of Israel's wars in Lebanon, bombings, assassinations. And I myself have survived most of these events, but so did my mother, so did my grandmother. So we're talking about generational trauma, and we don't talk enough about mental health when it comes to conflicts. And I wanted to really focus, it's one of the themes in this book, this generational trauma. My grandmother lost her husband in 1958. He was killed in a revenge killing following a family feud and a massacre that was considered as a prelude to the short 1958 civil war in Lebanon. And I grew up seeing her seeking this evasive justice that just, wasn't coming, because the man who killed her husband never served his prison sentence. And fast forward 50 years on, my own daughter survives the Beirut explosion. And to this day, 4 years on, not one Lebanese official has been held accountable for what is one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. And I'm mentioning this because the main reason why history repeats itself for Arab women and they never heal is because of impunity. We have this prevalence of impunity in the Arab world, the lack of accountability, which means these women will never find truth, they will never find justice, and so they will never heal and find peace. And so when I interviewed women for my book, I was there to talk about the Beirut explosion, but so many of them pulled me back to bouts of violence in the past. So many of them took me back to their memories of the Civil War. And of different, cycles of violence. And on top of that, and we can talk more, they're survivors of domestic violence, of discrimination, of economic violence, and so on and so on.
You had to leave Lebanon behind to heal. What has that been like for you, and what is it like for those who are still there?
Yes, the day I saw the trauma in my daughter's eyes after the Beirut explosion, I said, that's it. If I'm going to break this endless cycle of violence, I have to get out. And I left. But so many women stayed behind. And today I have a feeling that it's another reason why I wrote this book, that Lebanon is forgotten by the world and by the media. There's an ongoing economic and financial crisis that is labeled by the World Bank as one of the top 3 economic crisis since the 19th century. 80% of the Lebanese are living in poverty, 36% in extreme poverty. And Lebanon is a country, unlike what you might think, where the gender gap is one of the highest also in the world. So women were already behind. And what's happening today is that the women's rights agenda is lagging behind. Women are suffering more than men. There are women in my book that have no access to medicine. They have no access to mental health. They have no access to their savings, who vanished in the Ponzi scheme and the financial crisis. And so especially single mothers, women living alone with no children, have no social safety nets. They have no protection. And on top of that, Lebanese women are second-class citizens. For those who don't know, and unlike what we might think, because we say Lebanon is one of the most liberal Arab countries, all personal status laws in Lebanon, so divorce, inheritance, custody of children, etc., is managed by religious courts. We have 15 religious courts. And these courts not only discriminate against women when it comes to men's rights, but they also discriminate between women. So as a Muslim Sunni, you don't have the same rights as a Catholic or as a Shia Muslim, etc. And when I went and interviewed these women, I realized that on top of surviving the explosion and the economic crisis, they were navigating these very unfair laws. One woman fighting for custody, another one needing a male custodian to take care of her children after her husband was killed in the explosion, etc., etc. So having to also survive this patriarchal system and this confessional system in Lebanon.
You have heard the 3 panelists and the 2 online today. They all have had stories of great horror and trauma, but they all give us hope, because each one is standing up to tell stories, not just on her own behalf, but on all the sisters who are inhabiting our world today, right in the middle of conflict. And conflict which ranges from conflict inside the country with bombs raining down to conflict of climate change, conflict even of religious laws. So we have so much to overcome, and here are these women who are taking it on. So I want you all to give a big applause for them. And because I come from India, I'm an activist against sex trafficking, and I also come from the land of Gandhi and Buddha. I just have to say one thing before we get off the stage, that an eye for an eye will leave everyone blind, and all we can offer the world through our stories is the urgency of peace and how we can create it, not just through absence of war, but building a better world. Thank you.